I want to begin this review by apologizing to all the authors and contributors for this book because there's a good chance I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of your last name, and I apologize for doing so, just not sure how to pronounce these names. But the book I'm reviewing is Islam and the Bible, Questioning Muslim Idiom Translations, edited by Ibrahim and Ant Greenham. This is a book that won't be for everyone, but for those it is, this book should probably go to the top of your reading list. Islam and the Bible is a December 2023 release by B&H Academic, and this book looks at the controversy behind Muslim idiom translations. Now, if you're watching this review and you're like, I don't even know what a Muslim idiom translation is, there's a good chance this book isn't for you. But there is a possibility it might still be a book you should read. I'll start, though, with explaining what is a Muslim idiom translation. This is an Aramaic translation of the Bible that is written for the purpose of Muslim evangelism, in order to make the gospel more palatable to Muslims. The editors have made certain changes in the text, such as they've translated God's name in the Old Testament as Allah. Half of the first pillar of Islam, the profession of faith, is included in the translation. There is no God but God. And references to Jesus as the Son of God and God as the Father of Christ are translated into something else. The term Son of God, Father of Christ is altered in some way. This book is a critique or an examination of those Muslim idiom translations. This book should therefore be a must-read for two groups. First, those involved in Muslim evangelism. If you are witnessing to Muslims, you should be familiar with what's brought up in this book. And if you aren't familiar with what's in this book, I gotta say, I knew nothing about Muslim idiom translations before coming into this book. I'd never heard of them. But if you witness to Muslims, you should know about what's written in this book. And even if you don't know about Muslim idiom translations, I'm someone, like I said, I knew nothing about them coming into this book, and I never felt lost or out of my depth. I didn't feel like I'd have a strong grasp on the subject before reading it, but now I do feel like I have a strong grasp on the subject. The other group that should read this book are those involved in Bible translations. If you're in any way involved in translating the Bible, or if it's a major hobby for you or a great interest, this should also be a must-read for you. Because let's be honest, the issues we deal with in America today between critical text or majority text, word for word or thought for thought translation, that's nothing compared to the issues of let's add half of the first pillar of Islam to the Bible, or let's take out the Son of God. But those issues, I think, could be coming down the pipeline for us in America. This book was well written. The editors did an excellent job selecting the contributors. And if you have a few minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about Islam and the Bible. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that will help you to learn more about the current issues facing Christians around the world, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up to date with my most current book reviews. Like and share this video with others to help them know about the issues behind Muslim idiom translations. Also, I want to say thank you again to the Buy Me a Coffee members, whose support allows me to cover the costs of keeping up with Rev Reads in order to produce new reviews. And if you're someone who has found the channel to be helpful, I would love for you to consider supporting the channel at a beginning donation of only $3 a month. So I want to start with pointing out what might be the most controversial issue in this book, and also why I am 100% behind the editors in the choice that they made to go in the direction they did. This is a book on Muslim idiom translations, and it has a clear agenda. The agenda is to educate Christians to the errors of Muslim idiom translations and the danger they pose to the church. I agree with multiple contributors in this book that Muslim idiom translations are wrong for multiple reasons. from being deceptive to Muslims that we are witnessing to, or bringing error into the church. But the editors chose to have a couple of authors who are in support of Muslim idiom translations write chapters in this book. So you get to see both sides. And I found that to be an excellent choice. Why? It exposes the weakness of the position of those who support Muslim idiom translations. I was a little shocked reading it when I read one chapter that had these very strong critical comments against Kevin Higgins and his role in promoting Muslim idiom translations and the Muslim Insider movement. That movement encourages new believers in Jesus who were Muslims to remain in Islam and consider themselves Christian Muslims. So they have these kind of harsh words about Kevin Higgins and what he's bringing into the church. And then the next chapter in the book was written by Kevin Higgins. And I think allowing Higgins to present his side was great, because he has this argument that's based on Proverbs and that book's use of Egyptian materials. And even if you give his argument all of its weight, that you say, yeah, the Bible took Egyptian material and used it for Proverbs, that even if you take that argument, give it its full weight, and then just spend a moment thinking about what he's presenting here, you see that what he is having the church consider doing with Muslim idiom translations and the insider movement is actually the exact opposite of bringing that Egyptian material into Proverbs. If the Egyptian material was truly in Egypt first and then adapted for the Bible, what the editor of Proverbs who brought that book together was they took pagan ideas of wisdom and then they shifted them, they changed them to fit biblical worldviews of wisdom. Well, Higgins wants Christians today to take the Bible and shift the Bible to fit pagan worldviews. So to allow Higgins to argue on his own behalf, it lets the reader see that his own arguments work against him. They are highlighting that what he and those in the Muslim idiom translation movement are doing is in direct contradiction to how the Bible came together and was passed down. I think that chapter may have been the strongest argument against Muslim idiom translations, and it was written by someone who supports them. So it was a huge benefit to see that chapter in this book, and why we should not fear reading books by those we disagree with. Because at times the failure in their biblical interpretation or worldview will be more apparent when we read their own words. The best chapter overall in the book from my perspective was the chapter by Aaron Shyrock titled The Translation of the Names of God in the Akkadian Arabic Old Testament. The chapter was so important, especially from a newbie like me to this issue, because Shyrock, what he does is he walks us through how this specific Muslim idiom translation translated God's name, or a combination of God's name and God, throughout the Old Testament. So it shows the reader who is unfamiliar to this issue exactly what's going on in these translations, so we can get a detailed look of what is happening. And it was sad to read that chapter and to see how the Old Testament is being twisted to make it say something it does not, in order to align more closely with Islam. And his proposals at the end of the chapter were spot on. And I think part of the reason they were spot on was because he had all the information that you needed in order to make proposals on this issue. I think the most important chapter overall in the book was the one that just happened to immediately follow that one, which was chapter 13 by Kyle Davis on Bible translation by and for the church. Davis makes a very simple point, that if translations are made for the church, instead of being made as a tool for evangelism, the problems associated with Muslim idiom translations will not arise. The best way to ensure that translations are accurate is to have the right audience in mind. And the primary audience for all translations of the Bible must always be the church. There's a reason that Christians in Muslim majority nations do not approve of the Muslim idiom translations that are being brought in by outsiders. They know that they are both not for them and they're going against the beliefs they have that come from accurate Bible translations. We don't evangelize the lost by translating the Bible. We evangelize the lost by sending out witnesses. Overall, this is a really strong book. But again, it's not one for everyone. But I believe that those who it is written for, those who are involved with Muslim evangelism, and also those who are involved in translating the Bible, those groups of people will find this book to be very informative, helpful, and will even appreciate the authors who contributed chapters that write against the main purposes for the book. So if you're engaged in witness to Muslims or in Bible translations, put this book at the top of your reading list.